Hey guys, this is a video disclaimer before you watch the main purpose of this video. After looking back at the footage, the audio of this video that you're going to hear is different to the audio you're hearing now. I didn't expect the audio to be totally different, that it sounded bad. It's like that I was underwater, so I apologize for the weak audio. I think what happened is that I've plugged in a different webcam that has its own audio, and I had no idea how to change the settings, and yet I used my Yeti Blue microphone to record the audio, so maybe that's the issue. If not, I have no idea what caused it. I apologize, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video nonetheless. What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here. This is going to be a brand new topic from me to you guys, with a list of albums that have changed my life. I know my lighting, by the way, is absolutely stupid, but the weather keeps changing here in the UK, so I'm going to do my best. These are in no particular order. These are randomly selected albums that has absolutely been nostalgic for different reasons. So the albums from the first few to the latest stuff is basically through my journey of listening to music through different bands and artists, that I was inspired by what these albums were, and some of these albums got me into different genres along the way. So let's get started. The first one is Loaf, Bat Out of Hell, the classic album from the mid-70s. I remember this album very, very well. I was really young. This was before I really got into music, even more so. And this is an album which was so nostalgic, to hear some incredible, powerful, soulful vocals, and the musicianship that has been super tight, highly energetic. And this album brings back memories when I used to go to the swimming baths, hearing songs from this album, heading back home from the swimming baths to hear more of this album's stuff. So this brings so much of the reflection of what music was like to me when I was really young, and this is one of those albums that has been holding a big deal to me. The next album, this is from an album that I do still consider to be my favourite, from a band who used to be my absolute favourite, Green Day, Insomniac. I defend my opinion that some of this stuff on this album can be punk rocky, because this is arguably more heavier and as intense than any Green Day album. And this album cover, even when you open it up, still is absolutely incredible. This is always my favourite Green Day record for so much of the madness, the shortness of the songs, but it's the power behind the sound of the band that I love. The album's material, to the artwork, to me, has been, insane. The amount of detail, the collage style artwork, is one of my most favourite album covers of all time. And this album was a huge addiction, especially when I used to watch the International Super Videos DVD a lot, through the earlier and, in my opinion, better eras of Green Day. The next two is from a different genre that I was totally unfamiliar with at first, but these albums make a lot of memories. To hear Metalcore. Shadows Falls album, The War Within, because the song Enlightened by the Cold was mind-blowing to me. And ever since I had remember seeing the music video on Scuzz, I was 9 when this album was out, although my 10th birthday is late 2004. The album with the other songs on this, like Inspiration on Demand, To the Light That Blinds, to me is incredible. One of the very first, if not the first metalcore album that I've heard, as well as with this one, Trivium's Ascendancy. The song that blew me away was Pull Harder on the Strings of Your Martyr. The music video to this album is so strong, and I remember the Dying in Your Arms music video that I really wanted to hear what Trivium's music is like afterwards. I remember when someone decided to give me a CD rip, a copy of Ascendancy, and I still have it. Also, I used to try and draw on a blue coloured pen of that person. Ascendancy is to me a masterpiece. It's one of my favourite, if not my favourite, Trivium album. Always will be. Next one. This is a band that I've discovered through a game called Demolition Racer, and this used to be my favourite album from this band, and it is Digimortal by Fear Factory. Fear Factory are one of those first ever metal bands that I had discovered before Slipknot. And what really intrigued me about Fear Factory's music is Burton C. Bell's vocals, because Burton's vocals have been unique, very different for a different sounding vocalist, with a change of tone and hearing somebody that can change vocal distortion and switch it to clean vocals and, you know, combine different sounds through a male vocalist's sound. Burton C. Bell was one of the first. The music was addictive. I fell in love with this album, and Digimortal to me is one of those albums which gravitated the addiction to Fear Factory's music, especially with the music video of Resurrection, which is my favourite Fear Factory song, by the way. I know that's from Obsolete, but along with Replica, Resurrection, as I've mentioned, to this album, Digimortal, it's been an amazing ride. I still am a huge fan of Fear Factory, so this album does hold a special place. This album is from a band outside of the UK and the US that's from a different country. When I seen the music video to my favourite song from this band, this was something that I did not expect to be a fan of. Rammstein, Mutter. Sonne is my favourite song from this band, and the album as a whole is a classic. Some Rammstein fans would say Reise Reise as their favourite, or even Sehnsucht, but Mutter to me is the band at their best. When I had first played this album, Mutter has been a non-stop playing album. Through other songs on this that I admire, like Mein Herz brennt, Ich will, the title track, Adios. Everything about this album is perfection. So Rammstein were the very first German band that I've discovered, and I became a big fan ever since. This next album right here, along with Rammstein, this is another band that I've discovered from a different country. This time we're going over to Brazil. I fell in love with the music video of Slave New World from a video that I still own of Drilling the Vein 4. I haven't got the other 3 on video yet, but this album right here has been just a monstrous, punishing and political standout classic. Sepultura's Chaos AD. The album's cover art, I still have no words. Not only one of my top 10 albums of all time, but the album cover art is one of my most favourites. Other songs on this album, still amazing stuff. Territory, Clenched Fist, to Propaganda, Biotech is Godzilla, and their cover of The Hunt is very strong too. I do have big fonding memories of Roots as well. Chaos AD though was the winner. Next album, not metal, but like with Bad Out of Hell from Meat Loaf, vocally the touching, gentle vocal harmonies that are gorgeous and still sublime. And this duo has been one of my favourites. Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water. This is not only my favourite Simon and Garfunkel album, but I remember hearing the other hits like The Sound of Silence to Mrs. Robinson, some songs from this. I still remember going over, travelling to one of the secondary schools I used to go to, Dame Elizabeth, which I hated, then moved over to King's Norton Boys. I remember hearing some of the songs from this album, and it was wonderful. It's a glorious, beautiful album, and Simon and Garfunkel were one of the first groups that got me into folk and folk rock music. I have this album on vinyl as well, and I believe that I almost have every album from these guys on vinyl too. Not much on CD, but this album was and is, to me, the group at their finest. Now we're going to go into something extremely surprising from my first experience with this album. This album was something else. My best friend for over 20 years got me into a song from this band. I did not expect to be madly in love with this band quickly after that. Mr. Bungle's self-titled debut album. Weirdly, this CD pressing, I believe, is Australian, by the way. The song was My Ass Is On Fire. My Ass Is On Fire, it was funny, it was crazy, it was mental. And besides people got into Faith No more than these guys, Mr. Bungle was, I think, the first band from Mike Patton's career that I got into. Besides seeing the epic music video from Faith No More a lot on TV previously in my teenager years. But when I did listen to this album, it was so crazy. It's hyper, it's so interactive, because there was like a monstrosity of chaos that I really love. This is my favourite Mr. Bungle album, by the way. I have reviewed every album from their discography. They've only made 4, but when I reviewed this album, I could not stop talking about it. My Ass Is On Fire to Slowly Growing Death, quote unquote, Carousel, Egg, I don't really need to say a lot about this album because I've mentioned this album a few times with my album review and when I had placed this as one of my top 25 albums of all time. That's how much this album holds a big deal to me. The next album is from another metal genre that I've been growing to become a fan of, and this is my favourite album from this band. I'm really glad to be a Brummie for supporting Napalm Death as a metal fan and as a music fan, from enslavement to obliteration. I remember when I was a student at King's Norton Boys, and there was a lesson called IT. It used to be ICT, you know, doing stuff with computers. And while I was working, I sneakily opened a tab on the internet to listen to some of the music from this album. And I was not a fan of the death metal genre or, you know, something like this at all to begin with. But Napalm Death had made a really huge impression that I was going to be invested so highly of what this style of music is all about. Classic album, and I'm so proud that I am a fan from that point, from school to today. I still am a big fan of these guys. My favourite Napalm album. The next album in this random list is a solo album that I always do attach with for musically speaking and as well as emotionally. John Lennon's debut, Plastic Ono Band. Plastic Ono Band is the main album that is something special when it can grab my heartstrings. It was one of the very first albums that has introduced me to discover music in a very personal way. It's heavy with emotions. The song God, especially when I listen to the I Don't Believe parts, towards the end of the song after that, still makes me very tearful. It brings tears to my eyes because it was touching, painfully honest, and you know, this is one of the biggest reasons why I cite Lennon as my favourite musician. Loads of people say Imagine is his best or their favourite, but Plastic Ono Band is the number one for me in his discography. Next album, no introduction needed. Sgt. Pepper by the Beatles. Although the first Beatles song I've ever heard was Help when I was in primary school days, and I didn't know who the Beatles were. But ever since I really got into understanding and knowing what the Beatles have been about, Sgt. Pepper's, after the first listen, it was wow. This album was a huge introduction for me to get into genres, and more importantly, this is the number one album that has opened my eyes and ears even further to know art in a very big way. This album has made an achievable moment to listen to music that's highly artistic, and it paints so many different colours of paint to look at and experiment the music taste even further. This album right here is my favourite concept album of all time, and I am not going to be talking about this album so much at the moment because I am planning to review this legendary band's discography one of my most favourite rock bands, alongside with the Beatles and the Stones, The Who's Quadrophenia. And this is not my CD pressing, this is my father's. Quadrophenia is this main album that got me into The Who. I have loved the sounds of Won't Get Fooled Again, Baba O'Reilly, Pinball Wizard, Behind Blue Eyes, but when Quadrophenia was played in full for the first time, this was magical. It's powerful, it's a stupendous album. This is my favourite double album as well. The Who at their best. It's one album which introduced me even more to various concept albums. So I do give The Who a lot of the love for that, and after listening to this album for the first time, I became a huge fan. This album is my favourite Pink Floyd album. I've talked about this more than a few times. It's Wish You Were Here. The reason why this is in the list, I've addressed this previously, but I'll say it again here, because not only it holds a very special part for me to get into Pink Floyd as a whole, it got me into progressive rock. And just like with Plastic Ono Band, this album here is as personal and it's emotional, and the album cover art is what intrigued me as much as well. Wish You Were Here is Pink Floyd at, to me, the absolute best in their musical statements. The second to last album is from Black Sabbath. I would have said Paranoid because Paranoid is the one that is obviously a classic, but when I listened to this album for the first time on Spotify, that majestic voice, this catchiness, this terrific sounding album was speechless feeling, and I gotta give it to Heaven and Hell. I would have put Paranoid in as a life changer, but I thought that would be obvious, like with Sgt. Pepper. Some of you guys may be saying that same thing, but Heaven and Hell, as soon as I first heard Neon Nights, I was hooked. And the title track, I love Ronnie James Dio a lot. I mean, he's my favourite metal vocalist of all time. But I did not know that Dio previously was in Black Sabbath. I have heard of Dio's voice through different things, but to hear him with Black Sabbath, this was a winning combination. Heaven and Hell was an instant masterpiece. The other songs on this album are some of my most favourite Black Sabbath songs. Children of the Sea, to me, was incredible. Obviously the title track. Then there's, as I said, Neon Nights. Neon Nights is also my main favourite Dio Sabbath song. So this album is proudly here to be in the list for these reasons. This last one, the last album, is Fleetwood Mac's Then Play On. I could have put Led Zeppelin 2 in this list as well, but as much as I love Led Zeppelin, there was another band, Roscoe, there was another band that I have loved, and that was Fleetwood Mac. But through the albums like Rumours and Tango in the Night, but I was introduced to my favourite period of Fleetwood Mac. After that, the blues period, to hear the guitar legend that is Peter Green, also with Danny Kirwan, Then Play On is an album that I've mentioned previously, but this is my favourite guitar album. Hendrix is my favourite guitar player, but, here Roscoe, as soon as I have listened to Oh Well, two other songs, Roscoe, for God's sake, two other songs like Showbiz Blues, Rattlesnake Shake, and the jamming tracks of the Madge instrumentals, really big moment for me to know about learning lead guitar in a different tonality and sound. So I owe Fleetwood Mac a lot for this magnum opus of their discography very much. And I would also love to thank Melvin Hancox, who's one of my most favourite guitar players in the Birmingham music scene, and he's the one that got me into this album. Fleetwood Mac's Then Play On won me over right from the start, and I took lead guitar even more seriously to practice and improvise, all because of this album. And with that being said, guys, even with Roscoe coming in a few minutes later, that is it. That is my list of the albums that have changed my life. If you want to share yours, please put your list in the comment section down below. Doesn't matter if it's going to be at a top 5 or a top 10. It can be in no particular order like my list was. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.